Well, I think in the interest of time, I'll go ahead and get started. We may have some more people join us in a bit. I'm Cathleen Erwin. I am an assistant professor over in the College of Liberal Arts. I teach in the Health Services Administration program there. So this is the third in a series of three professional development seminars that I've done this semester on different aspects of team-based learning. And so my goal today is I'm going to do a little review because some of you have not been at the other seminars. Some of you may be repeats, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. You understand what team-based learning is. And then we're going to spend most of our time talking about what is really the heart of team-based learning, which is the application exercises, in-class application exercises that you use to engage students in active learning. So without further ado, team-based learning. So team-based learning is a particular methodology that is used as an active learning methodology. It's very structured in the way that you approach the class. You have these key components. Obviously, you have to orient your students very well to team-based learning, but you use strategically formed permanent student teams. I did a whole session on that about a month ago, and it's up on the Big EO website if you wanted to go and review that and why you use permanent teams. There's a lot of reasons for that. Then you go through a readiness assurance process, which is something that you're actually going to do today, because if you hopefully did the reading, pre-reading, and if you didn't, you'll be like most of my students. Where you spend time on the very front end testing your students on major concepts to get that kind of out of the way so you don't spend a lot of time lecturing. You really very rarely lecture. You have given your students a certain, maybe assigned readings or videos to watch or whatever, and you come in, you give them a test as individuals, then they take the test as a group. And part of that is learning that, collectively we obviously can know more than an individual, but it does require individuals to prepare. So once again, my team-based learning primer 101 was from a couple months ago. You could go back and watch that too as well, because I don't want to spend a lot of time rehashing that. So then what is really important though is we spend the bulk of your time on application activities that students learn to use the concepts. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And then finally, the other major concept is that there is a peer evaluation component to this to help keep from having problems with social loafing. So this is basically the TBL instructional activity sequence. They spend a little time in the individual study before class. You spend probably your first class period of a module. So if you break your class into maybe 4 to 5 to 6 modules of information that you're going to cover over a semester. So you take maybe one class period in which they take their test. And this is a high-level test. This is major concepts. I heard it referred to as a table of contents level test, not an index level test. You also have an opportunity, if maybe there's some bad questions in there, that you can give your teams an opportunity to even appeal the decision. And then you can maybe, from the results of that test, determine if there are particular concepts they're not getting. And then you can do a mini lecture. So you don't spend your time covering a lot of information that they very readily can get on their own. All right? And then you spend the bulk of your time in the application process. So that's just kind of TBL in a nutshell in 5 minutes. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to first, we're going to form teams. We're going to be a couple small teams here, I think. And you're going to take a readiness assessment test, a RAT. How many of you have ever taken a readiness assessment test? I know a couple of you have. Okay, great. So what we're going to, I know, because if you've been here before, you've taken a test with me. So this is often a way I've seen workshops modeled for TBLs, like you just do the workshop as a TBL class. So that's why you had some pre-reading to kind of get you acclimated to what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to divide you up in groups, and then I'm going to give you the RAT. You're going to take them as individuals first. Once you finish that, you're going to put that back in the folder I give you, and when I give you the signal, then your group will, no, you don't have to put it back in the folder. You can keep it. You can keep your answer because I would allow my students to keep their tests, so they always mark on the test, their answers. But they've already turned in, say, a Scantron or something to me. And then you're going to take it together as a group, and you have to come to a consensus. And you get a couple of opportunities to get the questions right. Most times when I do the group test, I use something called an if-at form. It's a scratch-off form, which is really cool. I'm not doing that today with you guys, but there are a lot of fun little tools. This is just an example of one. They come in different numbers of questions and numbers of answers, but this is like a lottery ticket, and the team would scratch off their choice, and if it was correct, there'd be a star. And they're like, yay. They're very excited about it. They get full credit. I give them 3 tries, and like half credit for each time. So that way, it forces the student to have a discussion about what they studied. So it's a learning process even as they're taking the test. It's really, this is the fun part. I love watching students take the test together. When they take it as individuals, it's your typical, I'm taking this test, I'm stressed about it. But then when they start as a group, they're laughing, they're joking, they're debating, and then they're rejoicing when they get the right answer. Okay, so if I was forming teams in here for a class, I would do it very strategically, and I would probably ask you a series of questions, and so that I could get an equal distribution of assets across the groups in terms of maybe levels of expertise, levels of experience. Don't have time to do that today, so we're going to do it the real old-fashioned way of we're just going to number off 1 and 2. So, 2.
1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2.
All right. 1s, 2s. So you're going to have to get up and move around now. Okay. We are taking a test on the pre-reading. You're going to take this individually, and then your group's going to take it together. All right. So, were you 2? Or were you 1? All right. Here's your folder. So the blue copy is the individual copy. So each of you get a copy of the test, and you can start. The blue copy is your individual copy. So go ahead and take that, and you can start taking the test. Make sure you read the instructions carefully, because it tells you how to mark your test. And good luck. Okay. In the interest of time, we shall now, at this point, I would have you give me your answer sheets. You would keep your test questions if you were one of my students. And it is good to time the test so that you do, because you're always going to have people that finish very quickly, and you have those that want to wait to the very last minute, right? You have to kick them out the door. So it's good to give them a time frame. Okay, now, I want you to be able to get together so you can speak. You're going to use your orange copy, and you're going to take the test together as a group. All right, and we're going to do this one a little quicker just because we only have an hour today. I've got some other things I want you to do. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Since your grade is not going to be affected, I am going to call this question. This is over. So here are the answers. And you can score yourselves as individuals and as teams.
So we got 2. We got 1 point here because we did A and B. The decision, or should we have all just done that?
All right. If you've calculated your score out of 20 as a team, what did you get?
40.
Yep. 14 out of 20. What? And then what questions were most problematic for you?
4, 7, and 9.
Okay. So this is something you can do too, is have your students actually walk up and write this on the board so that then you get a quick snapshot of what they're struggling with. All right, team 1, if you had been able to finish your, all right. I'll let one of team 1 write what you did on the board. Okay. So number 4. The high-level informed task. This speaks directly to Bloom's taxonomy in terms of it being a higher order of learning. It's beyond just knowledge and comprehension. It's getting up to actually being able to make some kind of decision based on that. So that's what that particular test, that question really refers to. We're gonna look at Bloom's taxonomy here in a moment. In number 7. other principles, we're talking about not using the 4 non-S very sparingly. And we'll talk about that 4 S's of application exercises and why they're important. Then number 9, yes, when do they have the most autonomy? Well, when they are working together as a group, you know, and they're trying to come to some kind of conclusion, a decision, that certainly would give them a lot of autonomy as students and individuals, and they're debating, and you're not involved in that, you know, at all, really. So, but anyway, this was just to help you work through that article. It's a great article. I don't agree with everything that he says. And so, but there are some really good information. There's some great information in there about the basics of. So how many of you made better as an individual than you did as a group? So 1. So it's typically you're going to find, very rarely you're going to have someone who's going to, on your application, on your test like this, you're going to consistently see that you're always going to have higher group grades.
Are these always multiple choice?
For a RAT, yes, yes. Definitely for a RAT. And we're going to talk about application exercises and multiple choice too. So let's talk about application exercises. So it's really the heart of what we do in team-based learning. So here we go. In terms of, we talk about flipping the classroom. So in flipping the classroom, we're leaving students to do this on their own. You go read, you go find the information you need. Here's, you know, grasp the concepts, you know, memorize, do that stuff outside of class. And I, as the expert, are going to spend my time in class with you, helping you do these higher order cognitive skills. Creating, evaluating, applying. So that's where we spend the bulk of our time in team-based learning and doing in-class activities. One thing that we want to get away from too is the typical group work, right? Where you sign them a group project, they have to figure out when they're going to meet outside of class, they divide and conquer. You know, we want to eliminate that. That's not the type of group work we want to do. This is really about debating and discussing and learning to apply. And so that's when we're going to look at something called the 4 S's. So the 4 S concept is that every team has a significant problem to work on. It shouldn't be an easy problem. It shouldn't be too complex, but it should be a pretty significant problem. And it's about what you want your students to do. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Every team's working on the same problem. So you don't have one team working on one problem, one team working on another. Because in the end, what you're going to do is after they work within their teams, you're going to be able to discuss across the classroom too, and everybody's coming from the same, has been looking at the same problem. You can get in some lively discussion about that. You want the problem, the application exercise, to have to make a specific choice. That it's not just, you really want them to have to come down and make a specific choice and not just something kind of fuzzy. One thing I saw when I went to the team-based learning workshop last year, and it was in St. Pete, a lot of people have gone to using high-level complex multiple choice questions for their application exercises. I haven't done that yet. I think I'm going to try doing that. I use different things like case studies. You may have someone doing a diagram. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what that could be, but you want them to have to make a specific choice and come to a consensus on it. It doesn't mean that there's an obvious right choice. That depends on how you design the exercise. But you could then at least foster, you might have 2 very close to being right, but that gives you an opportunity to debate and discuss that point. And then the last thing is you want them to simultaneously report. You don't want the first group to stand up and go, well, we thought blah, 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 blah. And then the second group goes, oh yeah, we thought the same thing. So you find a way for everyone to reveal their answers at the same time. So there are a lot of different techniques for that. I'm going to talk about a couple of those. So the significant problem, it needs to be meaningful. It needs to engage. It needs to be complex. There's a quote from one of the TBL folks that if you can Google the answer, it's not a good application exercise. Same problem, once again, you want them to engage and invest in the discussion. specific choice. You can then compare and contrast responses that people did. This is where I talked about before, there are different ways you can make a choice. It could be multiple choice. You could be making a concept map. You could be ranking, like that Kolb's theory. You could evaluate and rank these in order of importance based on some theoretical construct. And then finally, we want them to simultaneously report. You might have, if it's specific, if it's a multiple choice, you may have 4 cards in front of you, A, B, C, or D. And then when the time comes, you hold your answer up. Or we're going to do something here in a moment where you're going to write something on a Post-it note, and then I'm going to have you post it on the wall. And then I'm going to have you do a gallery walk where you go and look at what other people wrote. I'm even going to let you vote on which one you like the best. You could have clickers, you could use whiteboards, you can use push pins or sticky notes. Here's some pictures just to give you an example. So you can see the cards here. This is the easel classroom over in Haley with the glass boards. That's what I've used. That's actually my class on quality management, where I had them, I use them often to maybe diagram a quality cycle, a PSDA, no, PSDA, diagram. Okay, so now we're going to give it a try. We're going to give this a try. So we're actually going to talk about, I'm not spending a lot of time talking about what a naive application exercise is, but if you recall from your reading that a naive application exercise means that it's before the students really know a lot, or maybe it's the lower level kind of, something you want to help them start to grasp a concept or to see that they don't grasp a concept so they'll read more. So what we're going to do, and how many of you have had statistics in here? Hopefully everyone. Okay, so this is what you've read. So we have a learning goal here that you want students to be able to correctly interpret Pearson's correlation. All right. So I want you to talk to one another about what kind of application activity can you imagine giving your students. Now, the students don't know a lot about this yet. They're trying to grasp how to interpret Pearson correlation, So you've got information there. And I want you to discuss, y'all brainstorm an idea. I'm going to have you write it on one of these big sticky notes, and then you're going to post it on the board. Any questions? Think back to your basics. No, it doesn't have to be multiple choice. It could be whatever you want it to be. You could, but you want students to have to do something. Make a decision. All right? Yeah, work on this as a group, and it could be funny. It could be something the students would find interesting. It could be in their wheelhouse, so to speak, When you get to the point where you're ready to actually write it down, I'll just let you come and get a piece of paper and a pen. Yeah, just stick it right there. So we don't have time to do. So if we had several groups, you would put them around the wall and you'd go around and look. If I had time and there were 10 groups in here, I was going to give you all a sticky note and let you go by and look at what everybody else had done and place your sticky note on the one that you liked the best. So we can see, two completely different approaches here to how you might do this kind of task. So we have the correlation graph. Okay, so this is ice cream sales and chocolate sales versus Coke sales versus Coke and chocolate.
Temperature versus everything.
Ice cream.
Okay.
Versus Coke.
Temperature okay. Cool. And you're supposed to match the scenario. Oh, interesting. So match the correlation graph to that scenario. And then we have number of drinking establishments and number of sexual assaults on college campus. And which of the following statements do you most agree with? Drinking establishments cause sexual assaults, drinking establishments do not cause sexual assaults, or relationships exist between the number of drinking establishments and sexual assault. Yeah, look good. Naive task, they should be able to answer that. So, okay, so this is the sort of thing, and look how long it took y'all to sit there and talk about this, and I've rushed you. Right, so now let's talk about the process. I'm gonna rush through a little bit here. So what I'll end up doing on the end is cutting off I had an exercise for you to do at the end, but I will give you something to think about when you leave that you can do on your own. Okay. One of the important things in this is thinking about designing things backwards. Start with the end result and work your way backwards. You know, a lot of times we do our syllabus and we just come up, we look at what book we're gonna use, and we come up with our learning objectives, then we come up with what we're gonna do. This is completely different. Let's think about what do we want the student to be able to do, not what will they know, but what should they be able to do when they complete this course. And then working back from that. So you're thinking about assessing, how would you assess that, what kind of activities do they need, and then that leads you back to that helps you create your objectives. When I started doing team-based learning, I looked at my learning objectives in a completely different way. I threw some of them out because I had to really hone in on, we have 16 weeks, 15 weeks, with a student, and we try to cram in all this information, but what is it they really, to kind of clear the slate, just throw out the old syllabus and really sit back down and think about what should they be able to do at the end. How would I break that up over time? As I mentioned, most of my courses, I break them up to maybe 4 or 5 modules, or maybe 6, so they would take 4 readiness assessment tests. I would do a series of maybe from easy to difficult application exercises to help them work through the concepts. So I would identify the 2 or 3 major concepts that I wanted them to be able to apply in some way. So here, you remember this was what I mentioned before. We have, typically our classes, they do, in a module, they get ready, they take a test, they do application oriented activities, but the way we want to design it is that way. Let's think about the activities first. Once we know what activities we're going to do, that'll help us realize what we need them to read in order to get prepared for that activity, and then we'll develop our readiness assessment test to test, those high-level concepts. So it really does inform the way you teach. It's a different type of preparation. You think about how much time you spend putting a lecture slide set together. If you're like me, you spend hours and hours. You're going to do the same thing here, but instead of putting hours and hours into a lecture slide set, you're going to put your time into the application exercises. I have gotten to the point now where I just take the slides that come with the textbook sometimes, because people like slides, and I post them on the website. I said, there's a good outline for you. That also helps them study for maybe the RAT, just because they feel comfortable. I don't even spend any time making those kind of lecture slides anymore. I spend all my time trying to plan classroom period when I'm going to do 1 or 2 activities. How am I going to set it up? What are they going to do? And how are we going to debrief at the end? All right, so if you're looking at a module, so I'm looking at an entire module, what's the discipline-specific action or decision that the student needs to practice? Then you can think of how would I assess that at the end of that module? What would be the hardest thing I would ask them to do? And then you build backwards toward what do they need to read or watch to prepare for that? What would I test them on? And then also, what other activities can I do to move them toward that? Okay. So you want to think about, too, you want the groups to cohesively work together. You don't do a group paper. A group paper is divide and conquer, right? So we need things that they're going to have to, first of all, they need to be individually accountable. Often what I do is I'll have some kind of individual homework assignment that students have to prepare and bring to class. That prepares them to be a part of that group. So they do, once again, that individual learning. You know that they didn't just show up. They hadn't read the material, they hadn't read the case, or whatever it is that you needed them to do. So they turn that in, that's part of their grade. And then they're prepared to work together. Obviously you want people to be able to see each other and talk to one another. It's like I had you move around to the other side of the desk. You know, not every classroom is perfect for it, but you can do this in any kind of classroom. You just have to think about, you're going to have to rearrange furniture maybe, or just where people can turn and talk to one another. You certainly want to motivate some discussion. And you want to be able to give them feedback immediately. You know, they're going to report out their answers, and you're going to facilitate a discussion. And you want to reward them for team performance. A lot of times it's just the fact that they got it right. And there's been some studies done showing that, and I'm not talking about this at length, but some people grade application exercises, some people don't. I grade maybe 1 out of a module. There's a lot of discussion and there's a lot of material of people have debated whether they do this or not. There was a med school professor that I read that he said he was actually surprised that the students didn't really care if they got a grade or not for the application exercise. They enjoyed just the learning of it. They didn't have to have that explicit reward of, oh, I got an A on this assignment. But that's, you know, that's a whole, we could spend an hour talking about that. And I'm going to give you some materials that if you want to explore this further that I would certainly recommend that you look at. Okay, so what kind of so the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the application that I want to develop? What do I want to do in my discipline, in my class? If you could think about one thing that you're going to try to approach. Here are some examples. Decide which of 3 candidates to hire for your bank's VP position, based on resumes or information you've been given. Diagnose a patient. In English, you can give them a block of writing and to develop that you might use and ask them some specific questions, multiple choice questions that might talk about active and passive voice. Determine the best location for a new business. You may have, they all have a set of materials to discuss. You put a map on the board and they take a push pin or a Post-it note and they go up and they show you where they would locate this new business. Then you have to discuss, you know, what went into making that decision. Why did you choose that location? That sort of thing. As you can see, there are a number of different ways to think about this. And I think it's great to look to your discipline because you may find that some of these types of things already exist for you. I believe in benchmarking and borrowing from the best. One thing I love about the team-based learning community is they're very generous with one another. There is a website, people post things to a portal there of materials that they have created. So there's lots of opportunity to go and borrow. I'm in a discipline that's not using it as much yet, but it's growing. So that's something I've been encouraging at my own professional meetings I go to. If I can have a chance to do a seminar like this, I may make it a brainstorming session. It's like, let's brainstorm, you know, some application activities around healthcare finance. You know. Another thing would be, do you have people that are close to you that you might be able to work together and vet some ideas? Okay, so one of the important things is that you need to, and this is, I've tried to cram in too much today, which you will sometimes find yourself doing. But the important thing is that you've got to properly set it up. You know, this is what we're going to do. This is the objectives. This is why we're doing this. This is what I'm looking for you to learn from this. And then you give them the activity, very clear instructions. You may have it up on the board like I did in a handout. You know, you introduce the problem and you let them work on it. You may circulate and answer questions. It's really fun. I think it's fun. I think it's important that you remain active. Otherwise, they think, what he or she doing over there? They're sitting in the corner. But I always enjoy just kind of listening to what they're saying, being able to interact with them. It's very encouraging. Sometimes you'll be surprised what they're talking about, that they know more than you realize because all they've ever done is sit there and stare at you. So when they have the chance to engage. And then it's important that you close it well, that you can wrap everything up and basically bring it home, as they say, you know, what they accomplish. So you have to think about how you kind of time management and go in with a plan, a real plan. I've seen different TBL folks that talk about going in, if you have, say, a case that you've developed, create your own facilitation guide. I mean, you need to do the work too, right? So you're prepared. And another thing that happens is over time, these students are going to give you some great material. They're going to think of things you might not have thought about. So another important thing to do is for yourself is before you get too far away from it, as with any class, go back, make notes, go back to, I do a lesson plan, and I'll go back and go, this worked, this didn't work, this took more time than I thought it would, so I can adjust as I need to. And some things I've done have worked great, and some things I've done have fallen on their faces. It takes some, it takes a little time and effort, and when you have a win, it feels great. It really does. It's very exciting. And other times you think, oh my gosh, I'm the worst teacher ever. But that's normal. Everyone who does team-based learning feels that way. But it is very engaging. It's engaging of students. And so here's some tips. These are just a few from what some of the experts say. It takes time to build the skill. You'll get better. That's why I'm like, if you can go and find good exercises through the Team-Based Learning Consortium or through any of the books that have been written on it, there's a lot of research coming out. The health sciences in particular have really adopted this in a big way, but it is used across all kinds of disciplines and all size classes. Sometimes it doesn't go as well as you plan. You might have been, maybe you found out, okay, that activity was just too simple. Or maybe it was too complex, we couldn't get through it in the hour or the hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. Maybe I didn't have them as prepared as possible, but this is what I call, you need to plan to revise and resubmit to yourself. And then once again, you can consider whether or not you're going to grade or not grade. And if you are going to grade, as with anything, I think it's good to have a rubric, have clear expectations so the students know how they're going to be assessed. And if they're going to create some kind of artifact, even if they aren't graded, if they create some kind of artifact then that they turn into you, whether it's a worksheet or whatever, however your discipline or the kind of work that you're going to do lends itself. I would take pictures of the whiteboards, and I could upload them to the Canvas site. I also then have them for presentations like today, but that was fun. I would go in and be able to snap and see since they were not creating something that was going to be permanent. And we don't have those fancy whiteboards that would capture that for us. Okay. So we're not going to spend the time in here to do this, but what I wanted to do today, but I decided to do the activity instead. I debated about whether or not we would do that, is I want you to think about what you teach or what you want to teach. And think about your learning objectives. Which ones would you keep? Which ones are really the most important? And what kind of activity do you think would help you achieve that learning objective? So just start thinking about that backwards design. Even if you want to take some time before you leave today and make notes. I always like to do this when it's fresh on my mind. Since you committed this time to be here, even though our time has come to an end here in the classroom. But go ahead while it's on your mind and think about how you might design a course module. Start with your activities, work your way backwards. And then we're not going to do team discussion. I was going to have you tweet it out. You were going to have to do a tweet about your insider advice. We're not going to worry about that. Okay, so my slides are going to be made available to you. Here are some sources that I've used for this material today. Most of this is not original to me. I'm borrowing it. This book, I think, is probably a great how-to book. This is the Sibley book. And this is Larry Michelson, who's actually basically the father of team-based learning. Two great books. When I decided to do this, I went to one seminar, I picked up this book, and I just did it. And it was frightening, but once I kind of got in a rhythm with it. Once that quality management class, it was a new class for me, so it was a new prep anyway, and I got into a rhythm, once I got the hang of it. But it was kind of scary to start with. But there are a lot of resources available to help us with this. This Team-Based Learning Cooperative website is awesome. If you're a member, and I think the Big Yo Center has a membership, you can contact the Big Yo Center about that, whether you can get into the behind the firewall and see the members only section where there has been some sharing of information, particularly that portal where people are sharing their activities, and they're being vetted by, it's almost a peer review process. They're not just, you can't just post anything out there. So they're, especially in the medical portal, they are very much doing a peer review of materials. And what they do, when I looked at one of their sheets, it tells you, here's my application exercise, here's the learning goals, here's a sample of some of the questions that I ask on the readiness assessment test. So it's like it's a nice full look, from the learning objective to the activity and what happened in between. And I think that's also a good way to just to think about, that kind of planning. What kind of tool do you need to help you plan? Do you need a chart? Do you need I just create some simple lesson plans. I'm always Googling things. Google lesson plan. I don't have a degree in education. I wasn't taught to create lesson plans. How many of you were taught to create lesson plans? 2, right? So you're in an advantage there. But I highly recommend that you find some way to plan out, because you want to revisit it. You want to come back and revise it. And finally, I'll be going to this year. Once a year, they do a conference. It is fun. Lots of great workshops going on. They start off with a primer, like a full day TBL 101. They do exactly what I did today. They send you some pre-readings, you read them. They conduct every session as a TBL class, but you meet people from all kinds of disciplines. And so if you had an opportunity or an interest to ever go to one of these, I highly recommend it. I went for the first time last year. I'll go again this year. And if this is something that resonates with you. But doesn't mean you have to do TBL to be an active learner. TBL is just one methodology for approaching structuring of a course and using active learning and engaging students. It's the one that I particularly have been drawn to, but it's not. I have other colleagues here at Auburn that do all kinds of different things to have active learning. Even just creating these application exercises doesn't mean that you have to do full-on TBL all the time, right? But you might think about, how do I get my students to be actively learning in the classroom? And where's the best use of my time? The best use of my time is to sit here and tell them what they're supposed to know, or is to let them go gather some of that and have them struggle through the application of it to see if they what do I know? Not just to regurgitate it on a test. Memorize and regurgitate. That's the lowest level of Bloom's taxonomy. It's just that knowledge gathering. But we want to do critical thinking skills. We want to get at a higher level. And finally, you might even think about some of the test questions you've had that have been particularly difficult for people. Those might make good application exercises for you, where they could work as a group. So, any questions for me? No. All right. Well, thank y'all for coming. I'm sorry that I tried to cram so much into one session, but I just wanted to give you some idea of some of the things you could do.